Okay, so last section for personality, and we're talking about Sigmund Freud, and one of the major contributions he had were his defense mechanisms. So Sigmund Freud believed that um, in life is tough. We go through a lot of struggles and hardships, and our ego creates these defense mechanisms to help us deal with difficult times, with difficult situations. So we just really have a laundry list of these defense mechanisms that we're going to go through, and they're simply tools that our ego uses to help us deal with difficult times. So we're going to run through a bunch of these, and then we'll do a couple examples at the end, just for practice. So here we go. All right. So the first one is something that you all have probably heard of before. This is known as repression. So repression happens when there is some sort of traumatic event. So a person has some sort of trauma. Now remember, trauma is dependent on the person. What might be traumatic to you might not be traumatic to someone else. It's totally dependent. So a person has some sort of trauma, and what they do is they take that trauma and they, as the picture shows, they bury it into their unconscious mind. Okay, this is the key factor. This is not like, oh, I just forget this thing. They bury it into the unconscious mind. Okay, so that means a couple things. So first, you might be like, oh, well, that they are going to forget it. Good. Okay, because remember, when we're talking about the unconscious mind, we have a couple aspects. We have the fact that it's primal, we have the fact that it is unseen, and we have the fact that it's our true self. So those two last factors are really important. One, this is now a part of that person. It's a part of who they truly are. It's still going to influence them, but it is something that they have no access to. The trauma is buried into the unconscious mind, and that is to help them, not deal with something that was so crazy, oftentimes so crazy bad that they just can't deal with it. So think of repression as, once again, um, these defense mechanisms are supposed to help you cope with your daily life. Some things are just too much for us to handle, and so these defense mechanisms help you go through. You have a 5-year-old who gets raped, and that experience is so traumatic. Freud would be like, well, maybe one of the ways that we protect ourselves from that would be by forgetting that thing entirely, burying that into our unconscious mind. Okay, so that is repression. Okay, next we have denial. So denial is, once again, it's another one of our defense mechanisms, and simply put, this is not accepting or dismissing what we would call ego threatening truths. So once again, this is not accepting or dismissing ego threatening truths. So what you have is you have a person who has gone through something that they can't deal with, and so they deny that existence. A simple example of this would be people who have drinking problems, where they state, "Oh, well, I have a, I don't have like, there's a person that they obviously drink too much. They do have a drinking problem, but they say, well, I can still go to work. I can still socialize with my friends. Like, yeah, sure, I drink a lot, but I can handle it." And so one of the major aspects of this denial is that what happens when a person, even in a small manner, accepts that they have an issue. Well, when they do that, there's an expectation that they do something about it. So long as they continue to deny that they have any sort of problem, they can continue to do whatever it is they are doing. So you'll often have people who, have some sort of issue say, well, I can still function normally in the day to day in order to allow themselves to continue to do this. Um, denying this addiction or denying this problem. Okay, so that is denial. Okay, next. All right, so displacement is often happens when people get into situations where they do not have a lot of power or they do not have a lot of control. So let's see if this is something that's happened to you. You come home from school and your parents like you do something really small, like you drop your books on the table too loudly, and they like snap at you. They get really mad or frustrated. You're like, "Yo, I didn't do anything. What the heck?" This is an example of displacement where the person is not actually mad at you. They are mad at another situation, and so they take it out on you. So in these little pictures, you've got person A who is, angry or mad at, they had a bad day at work or something like that. But when they're at work, they can't yell at their boss or do anything like that. So instead of freaking out at their boss, they take it out on somebody else. Okay, so is is this person mad at this person here? No, not really. They're generally angry or upset about some other situation, but they take out their anger or frustration on somebody else, someone that does not deserve their anger. Um, so, uh, you know, you see this all the time with parents. You can see this with teachers. I'm sure you guys have done it, especially maybe if you have younger brother or sisters, where you're pissed off at school, but instead you take it out on your little brother and sister because what the heck are they going to do about it? So once again, displacement is you are redirecting feelings in one situation and putting and doing something to somebody else. I'm mad over in situation A, so I'm going to take it out on person B, or I'm going to punch a wall. Anyone here punched a wall before? That's displacement. What did the wall ever do to you? Nothing. You're just mad and you can't punch a person, so you punch a wall. That is displacement. Okay, so next we have projection. Okay, I put this one up because it's a bit of a handful, a bit of a mouthful to think about. So believing that the feelings one has towards someone else are actually held by the other person and directed at oneself. Okay, so what you have here is you have a person that is upset with something they've done or upset about something that they cannot handle. So you'll see this most often. Well, a great example of this are people who cheat in relationships. Okay, so you have person A, and person A is cheating on their spouse. Okay, and here's over here we have person B. So what person A will often do is they will often blame or mistrust person B. They'll say, "Oh, where were you last night? You came home 5 minutes late. Who were you hanging out with? Why were you talking to such and such? Were you guys flirting? Blah 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 blah." And what they're doing is they can't handle the issue that they are dealing with. They can't deal there, there's some aspect about it that you're a scumbag, you shouldn't be doing this, that they can't handle. And so that they do in order to, you know, get rid of some of that or to deal with some of that guilt is they project it onto that other person. And this could be anything. In the teaching field, I see this with certain teachers where they aren't good teachers, they don't do a good job, and so when a kid acts up in class, they lash out at the student. And in my head, I'm like, oh well, if you were just a better teacher, if you had better classroom management, they wouldn't have this you wouldn't have this problem. um, so yeah, there you go, that's projection. Okay, so next we have reaction formation. Okay, so this one's always has always the super cute example. Um, Reaction formation is doing the opposite of what you feel. Is doing the opposite of what you feel. So you might see this with young children who have their first crushes. And what you might often see is that little boys and little girls, the person that they first crush on are not nice to them. Instead of what we would normally think of now, where you're kind to them or you give them special attention. When little kids do have their first crush, oftentimes they're not very nice. Well, why is that? Well, the reason that is because the child is dealing with an emotion that they have not dealt with before, and as a way to deal with that emotion, they lash out. They do the opposite of what they actually um, feel. Um, so you'll once again you see this a lot with young children. You can see this with adults or teenagers, where there's a person that you really don't like, and then you see them in the hallway, and they're like super nice to you, and you're like, why are you being super nice to me? We hate each other. That might be an example of reaction formation. They don't know how to deal with you. They know that they hate you, that you hate them, but you're in public, there are other people around, and they can't, bite your face off. So they act really, really nice. That is reaction formation. Okay, so next is regression. This is not repression, this is regression. So this is returning to an earlier comforting behavior. Okay, so going back on something that's really nice. Okay, so for a lot of you, when you go off to college, you're going to miss some aspects of home, and so what you might do is, you call your parents like, oh, I miss this, or just talking to your mom or your dad or whatever, based on what's going on. Another example of this is people in relationships. How many of you have seen two people dating one another and then they break up and then they get back together? Oftentimes, the reason why they get back together is part of this regression. Single life is hard. It's sad, it's lonely, and they might have had some problems, but being together in a lot of ways is easier. So they go back to those earlier comforts. So always be careful if you date someone and then you break up, and then like a month later you're like, ooh, you know what? Be really nice to get back with them. You're really just leaning on that regression, and not always, but most of the time, it's probably not a great idea. Okay. So next, we have rationalization. Okay, this one's pretty simple. This is simply seeing the silver lining in a dark cloud. This is a cloud, obviously, and this is supposed to be the silver lining of that, but it's gold or yellow in this instance. It's beautiful. Oh my gosh, I'm so good at this. Okay, so that is rationalization. It is finding the good in a bad situation. The little picture that we have here is of a student that just got a rejection letter, and maybe for them, oh, you know what? I didn't get into the college that I wanted to get into. But hey, you know what? Maybe instead this time I will. Maybe I can go backpacking across Europe for a year, or I can, uh, get a job and make some money. Trying to find some type of, good thing that comes out from a bad situation. That's rationalization. Just finding the good, when something bad has happened. Okay, next is intellectualization. This one is fairly simple. Basically, all that is happening is you are undertaking some academic or an emotional topic of study. So the major point in this is that you are getting away from the problem And the way that you are getting away from the problem is by learning something new or delving into something new. So, for those of you who are avid readers, oftentimes this might be your avenue of escape. You are frustrated or you can't deal with something, so you're like, I'm going to go to my room and read a book, or I'm going to go and learn a new language, or something like that. That's intellectualization. You're frustrated, you're angry, and so now, um, as a way of dealing with that frustration or anger, you're going to go learn something. So very specific about some sort of academic pursuit. And lastly, we have sublimation. Okay, so what is happening here is uh, what we would call channeling. So you are taking your negative energy, you are taking your frustration, and you are channeling that. You are using that energy and directing it in a certain way. So you are mad about, your significant other breaks up with you. So what do? You're like, you know what? I'm going to lose some weight. I'm going to get buff. I'm going to go work out. So you go and work out. And you use that extra, anger, frustration to, like, I'm going to go do this thing. So sublimation is channeling, taking that frustration and using it to do something. You hear about people who like to clean, who get really frustrated and angry and go clean something. People who cook or bake when they're angry or frustrated. If you ever run into someone or start dating someone that bakes or cleans when they're angry, you should definitely marry that person, because they when they're mad at you, they're just going to bake some cookies. So, um, you know, yeah, it's a great tool. It's a great you know great aspect of their personality. A great way to deal with frustrations. Okay, so those are the defense mechanisms. So really quick, all we're going to do is we're going to jump into some examples and see how you guys do. So the first one, soldiers exposed to traumatic experiences in concentration camps during wartime sometimes had amnesia and were unable to recall any part of their ordeal. I'll give you the answer in three, two, one. Repression. Obvious. Obvious point here is this amnesia part just really kind of pops out at you. That information is disappearing. It is being buried in their unconscious mind, and that is repression. Okay, Paul, an aggressive child, had problems in elementary school as he would frequently fight with other children. Paul found when he entered high school that he could use his hostility in sports such as football. Answer in three, two, one. Sublimation. Okay, look, football, channeling aggression and frustration, channeling all that hostility when he was in elementary school, and plugging that in to being a football player. That is sublimation. Okay, next one. The young wife, after a bitter conflict with her husband, gives up the marriage as a failure and returns to the home of her parents. She again takes on the role of dependent child who expects unlimited love and indulgences. Okay, going back, returning. This is regression. Returns to the home of their parents. Takes on the role of a dependent child. Expects unlimited love and indulgences. That is regression. Okay. The habitual drinker may insist that he really doesn't care much for the taste of alcohol, but feels he is obliged to drink with his friends just to be sociable. Answer in three, two, one. My first thought on this is rationalization. However, if you say that this is denial, I won't deny you that fact either. You can kind of tie both of those things into it. So every once in a while, you'll have a answer choice that will be fairly similar. Don't worry, you won't have to worry about that on the AP exam, as if the defense mechanisms comes up, you'll just have to be writing about one of those defense mechanisms. Okay, so on Schoology, there are a few more examples of these posted, so if you want to get some more reps in on these defense mechanisms, go for it. Good work today, everyone. We are done.